everyone, and welcome back to the Bitch in My Brain podcast. My name is Josie. I am very happy, just like every week, to be with you today. I took last week off. One, because I can. That is the luxury of owning your own business, doing this podcast. It is a luxury. But most importantly, I really took last week off because I was feeling a little bit disconnected spiritually. And a few episodes back, I was talking about how my most recent seizure, kind of had me feeling a little unsteady, and I have been working very hard to get back to a place where I feel, really good from a spiritual perspective. So I took a lot of time to just reconnect with myself. I like to sage my room and pull some oracle cards, all of the woo-woo stuff I love. However, it had me thinking about spirituality as a whole and how nowadays it is kind of a confusing topic. And I wanted to talk and get clear rather on what spirituality truly is, because right now, a lot of people, when they hear the word spirituality, they immediately go to the woo-woo stuff. And I love the woo-woo stuff. I'm looking at my crystals right here. I love it. However, that is not what true spirituality is. And so I thought it would be a good episode topic to kind of reframe if you have that same perspective of it being, woo-woo. And it might be something, that you're not interested in. That woo-woo stuff might push you away. But I don't want it to push you away from spirituality as a whole, because spirituality is a lot deeper than some of the surface level practices. Although those help as you're on your spiritual journey, they're not necessarily a necessity. So I want to jump into kind of what spirituality is and what its role is in, your daily life, as well as a few practices that you can implement, because I always have an action step for you guys. That is a guarantee. But just ways that you can start to bring spirituality into your life in a way that feels good, in a way that's authentic to you and keeps you inspired, keeps you motivated. So without further ado, let's figure out what the hell spirituality is. So spirituality is the connection to yourself, the connection to your spirit. So it's really about your inner world and living with intention and awareness. And that is a very simplified definition. And I think an important thing to clarify right at the beginning is the difference between spirituality and religion. So a lot of us believe, or have believed, that you can have one or the other. And the truth is they exist independently. So if you are a religious person, you can also be a spiritual person. And if you are not jiving, with religion or resonating with a certain type of religion, you can be independently spiritual. So it's kind of this both and. And it's important that I bring that up because a lot of people become very averse to spirituality when they are very religious. So I also think it's important that we clarify how they're different and how they're the same. So religion is focused more on a set of beliefs. I said that's a little hard, set of beliefs. But it really is kind of a structured belief system that comes along with, guidelines or rules. And for some people, that doesn't resonate. Like for me, I grew up Catholic and, I went to Sunday school, all that jazz. My grandparents were very religious. And I tried to kind of get into it, but it didn't quite click with me. I had a lot of questions, especially around kind of these set beliefs and ways in which you have to live to get a certain result. So it never really clicked as much as my grandma would love for it to have. It didn't. I had a lot of questions. And this is not dogging on those who are religious. I am understanding, open, excited for people that find inspiration in that, set religion. But like I said, it just wasn't for me. And that's when I really resonated with spirituality. A good way to put it is religion is more of like a paved path that has guideposts and signs and directions showing you exactly where you should go. Well, I like to think of spirituality as this kind of unpaved road that you are, creating yourself. You're paving your own way based on what you're internally feeling, what has come to your awareness, and what you feel connected to. So whether that be, your higher self or your purpose in the world, it really is you creating your own path. And the path with religion can, weave in and out, but ultimately spirituality is very independent and very unique to each person. And that's why I like to kind of give people options about spirituality, because it's different for everyone. Not everyone's going to practice, not everyone's going to connect in the same way or on the certain level that you may. So I really like to think about it as kind of your own unique journey, essentially. And I kind of break spirituality down in 3 pillars. And those pillars all function to ultimately create our spiritual practice or our spiritual connection to ourselves and the world around us. So those 3 pillars, it starts with awareness, and then we'll move into connection, and finally meaning. So awareness, as I've talked about multiple times, is the starting point on our personal journey or our personal development journey. There's journey again, you guys. I'm going to work on it. But it's really about bringing to our attention the ways in which we feel, the ways in which we're operating. And it has this bigger question of why. It's essentially the why we do things. And the joy of awareness is you're figuring things out in real time, and you're really rooted in the present moment. So kind of a simple way to describe it is you're bringing your unconscious to your conscious mind. And if we are going to make change in our lives, we have to be aware of the changes we want to make, as well as what is sabotaging us. So that connection to ourselves, where we're bringing awareness to the actions we're taking or the way we're living our life, we have to be, aware of them. We have to put and shine some light so we can then move with intention and move in the direction that we want to go. And it immediately makes me think of my initial yoga practice. And I knew it was something that could connect me on a spiritual level. However, I wasn't really aware at the time of how out of alignment it was with my spiritual practice. Because there were times when I would leave yoga and I'd feel disappointed in myself, or upset that, the instructor didn't absolutely murder us in class. So, I didn't get enough of a good workout. And all of these things that were kind of clouding the experience during the yoga classes. And I was able to bring to my awareness that the reason why I would feel disappointed usually had to do with, me not being able to hold a pose or falling out of a pose, and, small little things during the practice that totally took me, out of my mind, body, and soul. And so I brought to my awareness, okay, where is this coming from? Why do I feel slightly defeated leaving a yoga class that's supposed to, uplift me? And what I realized was I was still in competition mode. And I was able to go back a little bit further, and I can link it to when I played competitive soccer. Because if you break it down, essentially, I grew up, I played for, 15 plus years. You were always competing, even though you were on a team, you were always competing with the girl next to you. Because if you didn't compete and you didn't, show that you were better or fitter or whatever, that might mean that you sit the bench instead of them. So there was this really big need to compete, and I was competing with women next to me. And these women I knew nothing about. They could have practiced yoga for 20 years. And yet I was still focused on, making sure I did a pose longer, or when you're, doing a chaturanga, take a little bit slower. Like all of these little actions that were essentially rooted in my need to compete and feel validated. Because if I was doing better than the person next to me, then I would have a great class. I'd be like, oh, I was so amazing. My ego would love it. And so once I brought that to my awareness, I was really able to identify where and when I can catch myself in real time while I'm on my yoga mat. And, if I'm side-eyeing the girl next to me trying to figure out what pose she's in, I can then bring it back into myself and say, Joe's, you're competing again. Why do you feel the need to compete during this class? What is it about winning against the other person that will make you feel good? And when I'm able to bring awareness to those feelings and emotions and actions in real time, I can reframe, or I can go inward and connect on a level where I can either accept that I'm in a competitive mood and I can release that need to feel shameful about competing, or I can acknowledge, okay, this competition I'm having isn't in service of why I came to this yoga class in the first place. I came to clear my mind. I came to be in my body. And by bringing that awareness, I'm able to shift and get into that place. So, like I said, awareness is kind of this huge piece of spirituality because it gives you insight into your inner world. And like I said, if we want to make change, we need to be inside our body, inside our inner world. So the next step, or the next pillar, is connection. And that ultimately means that we are connected to something bigger. And that connection or that link can be to ourselves, to a higher power. So whether that's God, I use the universe. Since growing up in, the Catholic realm, I found a really big aversion to using God. It was very triggering to me at first. So whatever, feels right as far as your higher, source or higher self, go ahead and use that lingo. So I'm a universe girl, as you've heard, in past episodes. It's also a link or connection to nature. And I'm not sure if I already said this, but connection to others as well. And the purpose of this connection is to really have us understand that we're not in this alone. And we're not the only people that are floating on this rock in space that makes us feel, insignificant or however it is. So it's really about connecting to yourself and your bigger purpose. And it also brings this feeling of kind of safety or security, as well as a shift in perspective. Because when we're able to look at things from a place of connection, we're more likely to see what is happening in the world around us, as well as how we feel in the world around us. A lot of us put up these, walls and barriers as we live our lives, and we forget that there's a lot of things outside of ourselves that are giving us information that will make a positive impact in our lives. And so this is a little woo-woo, but how I connect with the universe is I ask for signs. And like I said, this is a little woo-woo, but in times of doubt, and that's really what that connection is, you can lean on that. But I will ask the universe for a specific kind of omen or sign, however you want to call it. And I do this a lot in times where I feel a little bit insecure or I'm needing a little bit of guidance. And so I'll specifically ask the universe, am I on my right path? And if I am, show me bubbles. And this is an exact example, but I'll break it down for you. So I started this podcast about 2 weeks before New Year's Eve launched my first one. And, I had a lot of anxiety around it. I was nervous. I was moving out of my comfort zone. So I really was looking to co-create with the universe and find that guidance or reassurance that I needed. And so I was keeping my eye out for, some bubbles. And sometimes, I would force it. I'd be taking a shower and there would be like a bubble on the wall. And I'm like, is that it? That might be it. But because I was connected to the universe, I knew, this is going to be so woo-woo, but I knew that bubble wasn't the right bubble that I was looking for. I knew that I didn't have that answer yet. And so sure enough, 2 weeks later, we go to Pretty Lights in Chicago. It's New Year's Eve and the ball just dropped and they're moving on to their next song. And I looked around and I saw that they had these huge bubble machines going off and one was right below us. So I was literally surrounded in bubbles and I was just looking at the universe like, holy shit, this is the sign. I felt it. That was when I felt that connection. And then on top of it is I have this mantra that says, when I'm in alignment with love, the universe will show me my path. And sure as shit, he came out with an encore song and it was Give Your Love Away, which hadn't been played for, over 10 years. I think it might have been 11. And that was another kind of ping I got from the universe where I was able to look at what was happening around me and really feel that connection and that support. And that gave me a little bit of guidance that was like, I am on the right path because I am doing what I want to be doing and what is pulling me forward. And so that's kind of a way that you can connect, as well as there's, other ways where if you're really big into nature and you go out on a hike and you feel that connection and you feel that presence of another living thing, however you can embody or embrace that connection to something greater, whatever it is for you, the more you're going to be able to receive that support or safety that connection can provide. So connection's one of my favorite parts because I do feel very connected to the universe and it seems like everything always works out, which kind of leads us into the third pillar, which is meaning. And essentially that means having a deep trust that we have a bigger purpose in life and we matter in the world. And it's really this idea that life happens for you, not to you. And that is a huge piece that we should all consider because it is very easy, especially in this day and age, to slip into victim mode. There are a lot of instances and experiences where we feel done wrong and we feel, like we got screwed over. And it's easy to hyperfixate on those situations because it also feels good to be a victim. You don't have to take any blame. You can just sit in it. And that is not the way to look at it. And I like to think of meaning as my way of showing up in the world for a greater reason. And it really truly is the everything happens for a reason. So I look back at my, past, and I could be bitter as fuck, and I still have a little bit, resentment laying at the top, so we're working on it. But I look back at the way I was treated by coaches and the way that I was spoken to, and I can look back and say that was fucked up, how could they do that? Yes, that can be true. However, the benefit of that was from an early age, I learned how to stand up for myself. I learned my kind of self-worth. It wasn't conscious yet, I definitely had self-worth and in some ways still do issues. However, it really made me a stronger individual. And so I look at that as, instead of it happening to me, it happened for me, because it's only been beneficial as I've moved, into my life, into my career, all of that. And another one is my first 2 jobs out of college, I got laid off. And I got laid off kind of like back to back. And it would have been easy for me to be like, why the hell does this keep happening? I must not be good enough, blah, 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 blah. And at first those thoughts, came to my head, because little did I know that being laid off from those 2 jobs would then lead me into freelance, and would lead me to this client, who led me to this client, who referred me to this client. And ultimately, as I went on those journeys, learning different things from different clients, I now have made it to this point in my life where I'm using all of that information that I've learned to start this podcast, to speak to it. And without those kind of unfortunate experiences in between, I would have never got here, and I probably would have never, tuned into myself. So knowing that everything happens for a reason, it really allows us to find motivation when we're going through some hard stuff. Because if I can look at a situation, I bring awareness to it, and it's unfortunate or it's not going the way that I want it, I can feel safe in knowing that there's a bigger purpose to it. And it's my job spiritually, and this, spirituality as a whole, it's my job to be able to see that and bring that, awareness, connection, as well as meaning to all experiences and aspects of our lives. So now that you have, the 3 pillars of spirituality, I invite you to begin to welcome those into your life. And, we'll start with awareness. Awareness is bringing things to your attention, noticing how you're feeling, noticing what you're thinking. Is the bitch in my brain loud and aggressive, or is she, a little quiet, taking a back seat? So one of the best ways to do that is, meditation. And people complicate meditation, and I want to make sure that you are not intimidated by it, because it is such an important tool that we can use. And so you can meditate for literally 30 seconds, and it could be right when you wake up and you're just getting your day started, and you're like, okay, I'm going to just sit up in bed and breathe for, 30 seconds. I don't have to have my eyes closed or anything. I'm just tuning in to how I feel. So meditation allows you to really tap into your awareness. And then when it comes to connection and tuning in to yourself and the world around you, you can do simple acts of, going on a hike and connecting with nature. Or I do this. This is another one of my quirky things that I do in my spiritual practice. But I also do a little bit of earthing, which is, going and sticking your feet in some grass for 5 minutes and just letting that connection between you and the earth kind of inspire you. Or sitting in the sun and you're like recharging. It's just you connecting to what's going on around you. And also, this is where my woo-woo stuff kind of comes in. If oracle cards inspire you, that's a great way to connect with the universe. You draw a card and it resonates and it gives you that boost of motivation, however you want to connect. And there's no right or wrong way. It's just whatever feels right for you. And then the next one is meaning. And really, meaning is just that trust in the universe and continually embodying that idea that things are working out for us. And it's really, that trust and safety that we can find to keep us motivated and moving in the direction we want, knowing it'll all unfold naturally and the way it's supposed to. So those are kind of, the 3 pillars of spirituality. And I hope that this episode really cleared things up around spirituality and maybe opened you up to implementing more spiritual practices into your day-to-day life. Because when you are in spiritual alignment, everything does come easy. Doesn't necessarily mean all of the, little experiences are easy, but it does mean that you can move with more grace, with more understanding, and with more trust. So dabble in a little spirituality practices this week. I think right now I'm going to pull some oracle cards, get another boost of motivation and energy, especially as I go and edit this, because sometimes I can be overly critical. And knowing that I can bring my awareness, why am I being, critical? How can I connect to my higher self that will give me the answers that I need and what feels right? And then knowing that if this is an episode that I'm not 100% satisfied, I know that it was meant to be, and I was meant to learn a lesson from this episode and make tweaks in the future. So I'm ready to pull a card, and maybe I'll push it on social and I'll tell you what I got. So all of that being said, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this episode spoke to you, and I can't wait to continue to share so much more. If you're feeling called, please subscribe and leave a review so together we can reach even more women who deserve to live their best life. And you can follow me on social at The Bitch in My Brain as I share my journey and life in real time. I can't wait to see you bitches next week. Take care.